I stare at the fake notice taped to my apartment door and feel a sudden chill. Someone has already been inside my home. In my bag are stolen files on a $40 million scheme, my own signature turning me into the perfect fall guy. My phone vibrates with a call from the boss who just yesterday suggested I get my mental health checked. A calm, unfamiliar voice tells me no one is going to protect me, and now every dark car outside my window feels like a silent sentence. Before we continue and find out how it all began, please subscribe and leave a like. We truly love to read your comments below. I wake up to my phone vibrating against the laminate surface of my desk. A low, insistent hum cuts through the white noise of the office ventilation system. It is 7:43 a.m. on a Wednesday in late October, and the fluorescent lights above my cubicle are already flickering in that maddening, inconsistent rhythm that makes my eyes ache by noon. I reach for the phone without looking, my fingers finding it by muscle memory, and swipe to silence the alarm I do not remember setting. The screen shows 3 missed calls from Gerald Timpson, the compliance director, and a calendar notification that simply reads Mandatory Project Review Meeting, Conference Room B, 8:00 a.m. I stare at the notification for longer than I should, a strange unease settling into my chest like cold water. I have been with Darnell Systems for 9 years. I joined right after graduating with an engineering degree and a mountain of student debt that still sits on my credit report like a scar. I have spent those 9 years building a reputation as the person who checks the numbers twice, who catches the errors before they become problems, who never signs off on anything unless I am certain it is correct. That reputation has kept me employed through 2 rounds of layoffs and earned me a quiet respect from the senior engineers who remember when precision mattered more than speed. But lately, something has shifted. The Clearbrook infrastructure project landed on my desk 6 weeks ago, a municipal contract worth $42 million to overhaul the water management systems in a mid-sized county 200 miles west of here. It is the kind of project that should have been a straightforward technical review, the kind I have done 100 times before. Assess the proposed systems, verify the load calculations, confirm that the materials meet regulatory standards, sign off on the engineering reports, and move on to the next file. Except the numbers did not add up. The first time I noticed it, I thought I had misread the specification sheets. The pressure ratings on the proposed pipe infrastructure were listed at a threshold that seemed too low for the projected usage data. I pulled up the municipal water consumption records, cross-referenced them with the population density maps, and ran the calculations 3 times on my own before I was sure. The system they proposed would function under normal conditions. It would fail under peak demand, which in that region happens every summer when agricultural irrigation systems come online. I wrote a detailed memo outlining my concerns and sent it to Gerald Timpson with a recommendation that we request a design revision from the contractor before proceeding. 2 days later, Gerald called me into his office and told me that the contractor had reviewed my concerns and determined that my calculations were based on outdated consumption models. He handed me a revised report with a new cover page and a signature from someone named Dr. Raymond Costello, whose credentials were listed as an independent hydrology consultant. The report dismissed my concerns in 2 paragraphs, citing proprietary modeling software and referring to industry standards I had never heard of. I asked Gerald if I could speak directly to Dr. Costello to understand his methodology. Gerald said that would not be necessary and that I should trust the expertise of a certified consultant. He said it in a tone that suggested the conversation was over. I let it go. I told myself that maybe I was being overly cautious, that maybe the models I was using were indeed outdated, that maybe I did not have the full picture. I signed off on the initial phase of the project and moved on to other work. But 3 weeks later, I was pulled into a meeting with the Project Coordination Committee, a group I had never worked with directly before. They wanted me to review the final compliance checklist for Phase 2 of the Clearbrook project, which involved the installation of the primary filtration systems. I took the documents back to my desk and started going through them line by line. That was when I found the second problem. The filtration units specified in the contract were manufactured by a company called Hydroflow Solutions, a name I did not recognize. I looked them up in the industry database and found that they had been incorporated only 18 months ago and had no prior contracts with any municipal or state-level projects. Their certification documents were listed as pending review by the Environmental Protection Agency, which meant they were not yet approved for use in public water systems. I flagged it immediately. I sent an email to Gerald and copied the Project Coordination Committee, pointing out that using non-certified equipment in a municipal infrastructure project was a direct violation of federal compliance standards. I attached the relevant sections of the EPA guidelines and suggested that we either delay the installation until Hydroflow's certification was finalized or switch to a certified manufacturer. The response came back within an hour, but it was not from Gerald. It was from a man named Victor Aldridge, whose title was listed as Senior Project Liaison. The email was brief and carefully worded. He thanked me for my diligence and informed me that Hydroflow Solutions had received provisional approval from a regional EPA office and that the documentation had been forwarded to the Compliance Department for final review. He said that my concerns were noted, but that the project timeline required us to proceed with the current specifications. He ended the email by saying that I should feel free to reach out if I had any further questions, but that I should direct them to him rather than the broader committee to avoid unnecessary confusion. I read the email 3 times, looking for something I could point to as an outright lie, but everything in it was technically plausible. Provisional approvals existed. Regional EPA offices did have the authority to grant them. It was possible that the documentation was simply moving slowly through the system. But something about the tone felt wrong, like I was being gently steered away from asking more questions. I did not respond to Victor's email. Instead, I went to the EPA's public database and searched for Hydroflow Solutions. There was no record of any provisional approval, regional or otherwise. I searched for Victor Aldridge in the company directory and found that he had been hired 4 months ago, right around the time the Clearbrook project was awarded to Darnell Systems. His previous employment history was listed as private sector consulting with no specifics. I sat at my desk for a long time that afternoon, staring at my screen and trying to decide what to do. I could escalate the issue to someone higher up in the company, but I did not know who that would be. Gerald Timpson reported directly to the Executive Vice President of Operations, a man named Charles Darnell who I had never spoken to in 9 years. I could file a formal complaint with the EPA myself, but that would mean going outside the company, and I had no idea what the consequences of that would be. I could also do nothing. I could trust that the people above me knew what they were doing, that the approvals were legitimate, that I was simply missing some piece of information that would make everything make sense. I decided to wait. I told myself that I would give it another week and see if the certification documents appeared in the system. I told myself that I was not the only person reviewing this project, that someone else would catch the problem if it was real. I told myself that I was overthinking it, that my reputation for caution was starting to turn into paranoia. The week passed. The certification documents did not appear. And then this morning I woke up to 3 missed calls from Gerald and a meeting I do not remember being invited to. I stand up from my desk and grab my notebook, the one I use for meetings where I need to take careful notes. My hands are steady, but there is a tightness in my chest that I cannot explain. I walk through the maze of cubicles toward the conference rooms on the far side of the floor. The office is still mostly empty at this hour, just a few early arrivals hunched over their keyboards with cups of coffee steaming beside them. No one looks up as I pass. Conference room B is at the end of the hallway. A windowless box with a long table and 8 chairs upholstered in dark blue fabric that has faded to gray in the spots where people sit most often. When I open the door, I find that I am the last to arrive. Gerald Timpson is seated at the head of the table, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he flips through a stack of printed documents. To his right is Victor Aldridge, the man who sent me the email about the provisional EPA approval. He is younger than I expected, maybe in his early 40s, with the kind of neat haircut and tailored shirt that suggests he spends more time in meetings than at a desk. Across from Victor is a woman I do not recognize, thin and pale with dark hair pulled back into a tight bun. She does not look up when I enter. And at the far end of the table, sitting with his arms crossed and his expression unreadable, is Mitchell Varon, one of the senior engineers who has been with the company since before I was hired. Mitchell and I have worked together on a dozen projects over the years, and I have always respected his judgment. Seeing him here makes the unease in my chest tighten into something sharper. Gerald looks up as I close the door behind me and gestures to the empty chair next to Mitchell. "Take a seat," he says. His tone is neutral, almost friendly, but there is something in the way he does not quite meet my eyes that sets off a warning in the back of my mind. I sit down and place my notebook on the table in front of me, my pen resting on top of it. I do not open it yet. I wait. Gerald clears his throat and sets the stack of documents aside. He folds his hands on the table and looks at me directly for the first time since I entered the room. "Thank you for coming in early," he says. "I know this is short notice, but we have a situation with the Clearbrook project that we need to address before we move forward with Phase 2. I nod, but I do not say anything. My pulse is starting to pick up, a steady thrum in my ears. Gerald continues. Over the past few weeks, there have been some concerns raised about the technical specifications for the project, specifically regarding the filtration systems and the load calculations for the primary infrastructure. Those concerns were brought to my attention, and I have been working with Victor and the Project Coordination Committee to review them in detail. He pauses, and I realize that he is waiting for me to acknowledge that he is talking about my concerns, the emails I sent, the flags I raised. I meet his gaze and say nothing. After a moment, he goes on. We have completed that review, and I want to be very clear about the conclusion we have reached. The specifications for the Clearbrook project are sound. They meet all federal and state regulatory requirements, and they have been reviewed and approved by qualified consultants with expertise in municipal water systems. The concerns that were raised were based on a misunderstanding of the updated industry standards and the provisional approval process used by regional EPA offices. He stops and looks at me again, and this time there is something harder in his expression, something that makes it clear that this is not a conversation. This is a script, and I am expected to accept my role in it. I open my notebook and click my pen, the small mechanical sound loud in the silence of the room. I write the date at the top of the page and then look up at Gerald. Can I see the provisional approval documentation? I ask. My voice is calm, professional, but I can feel the tension in my jaw. Victor Aldridge speaks for the first time, his voice smooth and measured. That documentation is being processed through the compliance department, he says. It is not publicly available yet, but I can assure you that it exists and that it has been reviewed by the appropriate parties. I turn to look at him. When will it be publicly available? I ask. Victor's expression does not change. That depends on the EPA's internal review timeline, he says. It is not something we have control over. I write that down in my notebook, word for word. Then I look at Gerald again. If the documentation is not publicly available, how do we know it has been reviewed by the appropriate parties? I ask. Gerald's jaw tightens just slightly, but enough that I notice. Because I am telling you it has been, he says. And because the people who have reviewed it have more experience in this area than you do. The words land like a slap, not because they are cruel, but because they are designed to end the conversation. They are designed to remind me of my place in the hierarchy, to make it clear that my questions are not welcome. I look down at my notebook and write that down too. Then I close it and set my pen on top of it. Is there anything else? I ask. Gerald exhales slowly, and for a moment I think he is going to say something else. Something that might soften the edges of what just happened. But he does not. He just shakes his head. That is all, he says. You can get back to your work. I walk out of the conference room and close the door behind me. The hallway is still empty, the fluorescent lights still flickering, and I stand there for a moment with my back to the door, trying to steady my breathing. I know, with a certainty that feels like nausea, that something is very wrong. I know that the provisional approval does not exist, that the certifications are not real, that the numbers I flagged were correct. And I know that the people in that room just told me, in the most polite and professional way possible, to stop asking questions. I walk back to my desk, sit down, and open my notebook again. I start writing down everything I remember from the meeting, every word, every pause, every expression. Because if I am right, and I am almost certain I am, then this is not just a mistake. This is something deliberate, and I am the only person in this building who seems to be willing to see it. The rest of the day passes in a kind of strained normalcy that feels like walking on ice. I answer emails, review technical drawings for a different project, attend a routine status meeting where no one mentions Clearbrook. I keep my head down and my expression neutral, but underneath the surface, my mind is running calculations that have nothing to do with engineering. I keep replaying the meeting in conference room B, turning over every word Gerald said, every pause, every glance exchanged between him and Victor Aldridge. By the time I leave the office at 5:30, the sun is already set, and the parking lot is half empty. I sit in my car for a few minutes before starting the engine, watching the yellow glow of the office windows above me. I think about calling someone, but I do not know who that would be. I do not have a mentor in this company, not really. I have colleagues I respect, but no one I would trust with something like this. I drive home on autopilot, the same route I have taken for 9 years, past the same gas stations and strip malls and residential neighborhoods that all look identical in the dark. My apartment is a small one-bedroom unit in a complex that was built in the 70s and has been painted over so many times that the window frames do not close properly anymore. I unlock the door, drop my bag on the floor, and stand in the narrow entryway for a long moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchenette. I do not turn on the lights. I walk to the couch, sit down, and pull out my phone. I open the browser and search for HydroFlow Solutions again, this time digging deeper than the EPA database. I find their corporate website, which is clean and professional but oddly vague. The About Us page lists no staff, no physical address beyond a P.O. box in Delaware, no project history. The contact page offers only a generic email address and a phone number with a New York area code. I call the number. It rings 4 times and then goes to an automated voicemail that does not identify the company by name. I hang up without leaving a message. I search for news articles, press releases, anything that might confirm that HydroFlow Solutions is a real company doing real work. I find nothing. Not a single mention in any industry publication, no LinkedIn profiles for employees, no reviews or complaints or records of incorporation beyond the bare minimum legal filing. It is not that the company does not exist, it is that it exists only on paper, a shell with no substance. I set my phone down on the coffee table and lean back against the couch, staring up at the ceiling. The unease that has been sitting in my chest all day has solidified into something heavier, something that feels like dread. Because if HydroFlow Solutions is not a real manufacturer, then the filtration systems being installed in Clearbrook are either substandard or do not exist at all. And if the filtration systems do not meet federal standards, then the entire project is a fraud. And if the project is a fraud, then someone at Darnell Systems knows about it. Maybe multiple people, maybe everyone in that meeting this morning. I think about Mitchell Varon, the way he sat there with his arms crossed and said nothing. Mitchell, who I have always thought of as one of the good ones, someone who cares about doing the work right. I think about Gerald Timpson, who has been with the company for 23 years and whose job is to ensure compliance with federal regulations. I think about Victor Aldridge, who appeared out of nowhere 4 months ago and whose entire role seems to be managing problems like me. And I think about the fact that I signed off on Phase 1 of this project. My name is on those documents. If this falls apart, if someone starts asking questions, I am not just a witness, I am implicated. I stand up and walk to the kitchenette, opening the cabinet above the sink where I keep a bottle of whiskey I almost never touch. I pour 2 fingers into a glass and drink it standing at the counter, feeling the burn in my throat but not the relief I was hoping for. I know what I should do. I should document everything I have found, compile the evidence, and take it to someone outside the company. The EPA, maybe, or the State Attorney General's office. I should blow the whistle because that is what you are supposed to do when you discover that your employer is defrauding a municipal government and putting public safety at risk. But I also know what will happen if I do that. I will lose my job. That much is certain. Darnell Systems will claim that I misunderstood the situation, that I acted in bad faith, that I violated my employment contract by disclosing confidential information. They will make sure that no other engineering firm in the state will hire me. I will burn through my savings in 6 months, maybe less. I will lose my apartment, my health insurance, my entire professional reputation, and there is no guarantee that anyone will listen to me. I am a mid-level engineer with no legal training and no proof beyond my own calculations and a hunch that the people above me are lying. Victor Aldridge has polished emails and consultants with credentials. Gerald Timpson has 23 years of credibility. I have a notebook full of handwritten notes and a growing sense of panic. I finish the whiskey and rinse the glass in the sink, setting it on the drying rack next to the 2 plates I washed this morning. I stand there for a long time, staring out the small window above the sink at the dark outline of the building next door. And then I make a decision. I am not going to do nothing, but I am also not going to burn my life down without being absolutely certain that I am right. I need more evidence. I need something concrete, something that cannot be dismissed or explained away. I need to know who else is involved and how deep this goes. And I need to do it carefully because the moment anyone realizes I am digging, they will move to shut me down. The next morning I arrive at the office early again, before most of the other engineers. I log into my workstation and open the internal project database, navigating to the Clearbrook file. I start downloading everything I can find. Contract documents, technical specifications, compliance checklists, email threads, meeting notes. I save them all to an encrypted folder on a portable drive I bought at a drugstore on my way in. It takes me 40 minutes and my hands are shaking the entire time, waiting for someone to walk by and ask what I am doing. No one does. When I am finished, I eject the drive and slip it into my pocket. Then I open my email and scroll back through the last 2 months, looking for anything related to the Project Coordination Committee. I find a thread from early September, back when I was first assigned to Clearbrook, and I notice something I missed before. The committee is made up of 5 people: Victor Aldridge, Gerald Timpson, a woman named Carolyn Pfeiffer from the Contracts Department, a man named Derek Hu from Finance, and someone listed only as external consultant, no name given. I write down the names in my notebook. Then I search the company directory for Carolyn Pfeiffer. Her office is 2 floors above mine, in the Contracts and Procurement Division. I have never spoken to her, but her profile lists her work email and her extension. I hesitate for a moment, then pick up my desk phone and dial her number. It rings 3 times before she answers. Carolyn Pfeiffer. Her voice is clipped, professional, like she is already halfway through another task. "Hi, this is from engineering," I say, keeping my tone light. "I am working on the Clearbrook project, and I had a quick question about one of the contractor agreements. I was hoping you could help me out." There is a pause. "What kind of question?" she asks. "I am trying to confirm the original bid documentation for HydroFlow Solutions," I say. "I need to cross-reference it with the technical specs, but I am not seeing it in the shared project folder. Do you have a copy I could take a look at?" Another pause, longer this time. "Why do you need the bid documentation?" she asks, and there is something in her tone now, something guarded. "Just routine verification," I say. "I want to make sure everything aligns before we move into phase 2. There is silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment I think she is hung up. Then she speaks again, her voice careful. "You should direct that request to Victor Aldridge," she says. "He is handling all contractor documentation for Clearbrook." And before I can respond, she adds, "I would not recommend pursuing this on your own." Then she does hang up. I set the phone down slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. That was not a refusal. That was a warning. I sit back in my chair and stare at my screen, trying to process what just happened. Carolyn Pfeiffer knows something, and whatever she knows, it is enough to make her afraid. I spend the rest of the morning pretending to work while I think through my options. I cannot go to anyone inside the company, that much is clear now. But I also cannot go outside without more proof. I need to know what is in those contractor agreements, and I need to know who the external consultant is. Just before lunch, I get an email from Victor Aldridge. The subject line reads, "Clearbrook Phase 2 Timeline." I open it with a sense of creeping inevitability. The email is short and to the point. It informs me that my role on the Clearbrook project is being transitioned to focus on quality assurance review rather than active compliance oversight. It says that this will allow me to better utilize my technical expertise while streamlining the approval process. It thanks me for my contribution so far. At the bottom, in a line that feels like it was added as an afterthought, it says that I should direct all future questions about the project to Victor directly, and that I should refrain from reaching out to other departments to avoid creating confusion or duplicating efforts. I read the email 3 times. Then I close it without responding. They are cutting me out, not firing me, not reprimanding me, just quietly moving me to the side where I cannot cause problems. It is a smart move, professionally polished and impossible to argue against without sounding paranoid. But it also means I am running out of time. I leave the office at noon, telling my supervisor that I have a dentist appointment. I do not. I drive across town to the public library, a low brick building with free Wi-Fi and rows of outdated desktop computers that no one monitors. I find an empty terminal in the back corner, log in as a guest, and pull up the portable drive. I start going through the files I downloaded this morning, reading every email, every memo, every technical report. It takes me 2 hours, but eventually I find it. Buried in a forwarded email chain from late August, there is a message from someone named Philip Krensky at an email domain I do not recognize. The message is brief, just a confirmation that the Phase 1 environmental assessment has been finalized and approved, and it is signed Philip Krensky, Environmental Solutions Group. I search for Environmental Solutions Group. The results are sparse. There is a website, bare bones and generic, listing environmental consulting services. There is a business registration in Nevada. There is nothing else. No client list, no case studies, no staff directory. I search for Philip Krensky specifically, and this time I find something. A LinkedIn profile minimally filled out listing him as an independent contractor specializing in regulatory compliance. His previous employment history includes 3 companies I have never heard of, all of which were dissolved within 2 years of their incorporation. And at the bottom of his profile under certifications, there is nothing. No EPA credentials, no state licenses, no professional affiliations. Philip Krensky is not a real environmental consultant. He is a name on a piece of paper, just like HydroFlow Solutions is a name on a piece of paper. I sit back in the chair, staring at the screen, and I feel the last thin thread of doubt snap. This is not a mistake. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a deliberate, organized fraud, and it is being carried out by people who know exactly what they are doing. And I am the only person who seems to care, I erase my browser history, log out of the terminal, and leave the library. I sit in my car in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, and I try to decide what to do next. I could still walk away. I could accept the new role Victor assigned me, keep my head down, collect my paycheck, and pretend I never saw any of this. No one would blame me. No one would even know. But I would know. And I am not sure I can live with that. I pull out my phone and search for the contact information for the Environmental Protection Agency's regional office. I find a phone number for their fraud and compliance hotline. I stare at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. And then I put the phone away. Not yet. Not until I have everything. Because if I am going to do this, I am going to do it right. I spend the weekend in my apartment, pacing the small living room and trying to map out a plan that does not end with me unemployed and blacklisted. I spread everything I have across my coffee table, printouts of the emails, screenshots of the fake certifications, notes on the discrepancies in the technical specs, a timeline of every conversation and meeting. I organize it like I would organize a structural analysis, breaking the problem down into components, identifying the weak points, calculating the load paths. By Sunday evening, I have a clearer picture of what I am dealing with. The Clearbrook project is being pushed through using fake consultants, unapproved equipment, and falsified compliance documents. The people involved include at least Victor Aldridge, Gerald Timpson, Carolyn Pfeiffer, and Derek Hu from finance, plus whoever Philip Krensky really is. The external consultant on the committee is almost certainly Krensky or someone like him, a hired ghost brought in to rubber stamp whatever needs approval. What I do not have is motive. I do not understand why Darnell Systems would risk something like this. The company is profitable, stable, not desperate for contracts. The Clearbrook project is worth $42 million, but that is not an unusual figure for a firm of this size. It does not make sense unless there is something about this specific project that I am not seeing, something that makes the risk worth it. I decide to follow the money. On Monday morning, I call in sick. I have never used a sick day for anything other than actual illness in 9 years, and my supervisor does not question it. I wait until 9:30 when I know the office will be fully staffed, and then I drive to the county records office in Clearbrook. It is a 2-hour drive through flat farmland and small towns that look like they have been losing population for decades. Clearbrook itself is bigger than I expected, maybe 15,000 people, with a compact downtown area and a sprawl of residential streets that fade into fields. The county records office is in the basement of the courthouse, a dim space with linoleum floors and metal filing cabinets that look older than I am. A woman in her 60s sits behind a desk near the entrance, reading a paperback novel with a cowboy on the cover. I approach her and ask if I can access the public records for the water infrastructure project. She sets down her book and eyes me with mild suspicion. "You a reporter?" she asks. "No," I say. I work for the engineering firm managing the project. I just need to review some of the original contract documents. She nods slowly, then gestures toward a row of filing cabinets along the far wall. Municipal contracts are over there, she says. Clearbrook Infrastructure is in the third drawer from the top. Help yourself. I thank her and walk over to the cabinets. I pull open the drawer and find a thick accordion folder labeled Clearbrook Water Management Project, 2024 to 2026. I carry it to a small desk in the corner and start going through the contents. The contract between Clearbrook County and Darnell Systems is straightforward, a standard municipal agreement with payment milestones tied to project phases. But underneath it, I find something else. A secondary agreement between the county and a private investment group called Crescent Hill Partners. The agreement outlines a financing arrangement in which Crescent Hill is providing a low-interest loan to the county to cover the upfront costs of the infrastructure project. In exchange, Crescent Hill will receive a percentage of the county's water utility revenue for the next 20 years. I read the terms twice, trying to understand why a private investment group would be involved in a municipal water project at all. The county could have bonded the project through traditional municipal financing, which would have been cheaper and less complicated. The only reason to bring in a private lender is if the county could not secure a bond, which usually means their credit rating is too low or their financial situation is too unstable. I pull out my phone and search for Crescent Hill Partners. The results are minimal. A business registration in Delaware, a bland corporate website with no staff listing, and a single news article from 3 years ago about a real estate development deal in Nevada that fell through amid allegations of fraud. I take pictures of every page in the folder, then put it back in the cabinet. I thank the woman at the desk and leave the courthouse, walking out into the cold November air with my mind racing. Crescent Hill Partners is another shell, just like Hydroflow Solutions and Environmental Solutions Group. And if they are financing the Clearbrook project, then they have a direct financial interest in making sure the project moves forward quickly and cheaply, even if that means cutting corners on safety and compliance. I sit in my car in the courthouse parking lot and pull up the payment schedule from the contract. Phase 1, which I signed off on 6 weeks ago, triggered a payment of $8 million from the county to Darnell Systems. Phase 2, which is about to begin, will trigger another $12 million. If the project is completed on schedule, Darnell will receive the full $42 million by next summer, and Crescent Hill will start collecting their percentage of the water revenue immediately after. But if the project is delayed or canceled due to compliance failures, none of that happens. Darnell does not get paid, Crescent Hill does not get their revenue stream, and someone somewhere loses a lot of money. I start to see the shape of it now. This is not about Darnell Systems cutting corners to boost their profit margin. This is about someone using Darnell as a vehicle to push through a fraudulent project that benefits Crescent Hill. And the people inside Darnell who are involved, Victor, Gerald, Carol, and Derek, are either being paid off or pressured into compliance. I do not know which, and I am not sure it matters. What matters is that I now have enough to take to the EPA. I have fake consultants, unapproved equipment, falsified compliance documents, and a financial trail that connects the project to a private investment group with a history of fraud. It is not perfect, but it is enough to trigger an investigation. I pull out my phone and open the contact information for the EPA hotline. My finger hovers over the call button, and then I see a car pull into the parking lot behind me. A dark blue sedan with tinted windows. It parks 3 spaces away and the driver does not get out. I watch it in my rearview mirror, my pulse starting to pick up. It could be nothing. It could be someone here for court business, someone waiting for a friend. But the timing feels wrong, and the way the car is positioned, angled so the driver has a clear view of my vehicle, sets off every alarm in my head. I put my phone away and start my engine. I pull out of the parking lot slowly, keeping my eyes on the rearview mirror. The blue sedan does not follow. I drive 2 blocks, turn left, and pull into the parking lot of a gas station. I wait. 30 seconds later, the blue sedan turns onto the same street and drives past the gas station without slowing down. I cannot see the driver through the tinted windows. I sit there for 5 minutes watching the road, waiting to see if the car comes back. It does not. I tell myself I am being paranoid, that I am seeing threats where there are none. But I also remember Carolyn Pfeiffer's warning on the phone, the way she told me not to pursue this on my own, like she knew something I did not. I leave the gas station and take a different route back to the city, checking my mirrors every few minutes. By the time I get home, it is almost dark and I am exhausted in a way that has nothing to do with the drive. I lock my apartment door behind me and sit on the couch with my phone in my hand, staring at the EPA contact information. I need to make the call. I know I need to make the call. But something is stopping me. A voice in the back of my mind that keeps asking the same question. What happens after? What happens when I file the report and the investigation starts? What happens when Darnell's systems figures out that I am the one who reported them? What happens when Victor Aldridge or Gerald Timpson or whoever is really running this decides that I am a problem that needs to be managed? I think about the blue sedan in the parking lot. I think about the way Carolyn hung up on me. I think about the fact that I am one person with a notebook and a portable drive, going up against people who have the resources to create entire fake companies and the willingness to commit fraud on a scale that could put lives at risk. And I realize that I am afraid, not just of losing my job, but of what might happen if I push this too far, if I make myself a target. I set my phone down on the coffee table and lean back against the couch, closing my eyes. I do not make the call. Not tonight. The next morning I go back to work. I sit at my desk and open my email, and there is a message waiting for me from Victor Aldridge. The subject line reads, "Meeting request." The email is short. Victor wants to meet with me this afternoon at 2 o'clock in his office to discuss my transition to the quality assurance role on Clearbrook. He says it will only take a few minutes and that he wants to make sure I have everything I need to be successful in the new position. I read the email 3 times, looking for subtext, for a threat hidden in the polite corporate language. I do not find one, but that does not mean it is not there. I reply with a single word. Confirmed. At 1:55, I walk up 2 floors to Victor's office. It is larger than I expected, with a window overlooking the parking lot and a desk that looks like it was chosen for its ability to intimidate. Victor is sitting behind it, typing on his laptop. He looks up when I knock on the open door and gestures for me to come in. "Close the door," he says. I do. I sit down in the chair across from his desk and wait. Victor finishes whatever he is typing, then closes the laptop and folds his hands on top of it. He looks at me with an expression that is calm, almost friendly, but there is something in his eyes that makes my stomach tighten. "I wanted to check in with you," he says. "I know the transition to a new role can be disorienting, and I want to make sure you understand that this is not a demotion. Your work on Clearbrook has been valuable, but we need someone with your technical skills focused on quality assurance rather than compliance oversight. It makes better use of your expertise." I nod, but I do not say anything. Victor leans back in his chair, still watching me. "I also wanted to address something that has come to my attention," he says. His tone is still calm, but there is an edge to it now. "It has been brought to my attention that you have been making inquiries about contractor documentation and reaching out to other departments with questions about the project. I need you to understand that this kind of behavior creates confusion, and undermines the efficiency of the project coordination process. I keep my expression neutral. I was just trying to verify the technical specs, I say. That is part of my job. Not anymore, Victor says. Your new role does not require that level of involvement. And to be frank, your continued questions are starting to raise concerns about your ability to work as part of a team. I want to be clear. If you have concerns about the project, you bring them to me. You do not go around me. You do not contact other departments. You do not make unilateral decisions about what needs to be investigated. Is that understood? The words are delivered in a tone that is perfectly professional, but the message underneath is unmistakable. This is a warning. I am being told in no uncertain terms to stop digging. I meet Victor's gaze and hold it for a long moment. Then I nod. Understood, I say. Victor's expression softens just slightly. Good, he says. I am glad we could clear that up. I think you will find the quality assurance role suits you well. Just focus on the work in front of you and let the rest of us handle the coordination. He opens his laptop again, a clear signal that the conversation is over. I stand up and walk to the door. As I reach for the handle, Victor speaks again. One more thing, he says. I turn back to look at him. He is not looking at me. His eyes are on his screen, his fingers already moving across the keyboard. I heard you called in sick yesterday, he says. I hope you are feeling better. The words hang in the air, innocuous on the surface but loaded with meaning. He knows I was not sick. He knows I went somewhere. Maybe he even knows where. I do not respond. I just open the door and walk out, my heart pounding in my chest. That night, I sit in my apartment with all the lights off, staring at the glow of my laptop screen. I have been scrolling through the files on the portable drive for hours, looking for something I might have missed, something that would give me leverage or protection or just a clearer understanding of what I am up against. But there is nothing new. Just the same fake consultants, the same unapproved equipment, the same web of financial connections that all lead back to Crescent Hill Partners. I close the laptop and sit in the dark, listening to the hum of traffic outside my window. I think about Victor's warning, the way he mentioned my sick day like it was a casual observation when we both know it was not. Someone is watching me. Maybe they have been watching me for longer than I realize. Maybe they know about the portable drive, the files I downloaded, the calls I made. Maybe they are just waiting to see what I do next. I pull out my phone and open the EPA hotline number again. My thumb hovers over the screen, and then I hear something that makes my blood run cold. Footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. Slow, deliberate, stopping right outside my door. I freeze, my heart hammering in my chest. The footsteps pause. Then I hear the sound of paper rustling, something being slid under my door. The footsteps retreat, fading down the hallway. I sit there for a full minute, not moving, barely breathing. Then I stand up and walk slowly to the door. On the floor, half visible in the dim light from the window, is a piece of paper. I pick it up and carry it to the kitchen, turning on the light above the sink. It is a printed notice, formatted to look official, with a header that reads, Building Management Notice, and a message informing residents that maintenance will be conducting routine inspections of all units tomorrow between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Residents are not required to be present. I read it twice, then turn it over. The back is blank. I walk to the door and open it, looking out into the hallway. It is empty. I close the door and lock it, then check the deadbolt. I walk through the apartment, checking the windows, making sure everything is secure. Then I sit down on the couch and stare at the notice in my hands. It could be legitimate. Building management does conduct inspections, though I cannot remember the last time they gave notice this way. But the timing feels wrong. The day after Victor warned me. The day after I was followed in Clearbrook. I pull out my phone and call the building management office. It rings 6 times and goes to voicemail. I hang up without leaving a message. I search my email for any official notices from the building. There is nothing. I fold the paper and set it on the coffee table. Then I stand up and start packing. I do not have much. Some clothes, my laptop, the portable drive, my notebook. I pack it all into a duffel bag, moving quickly, my hands shaking. I do not know if I am overreacting. I do not know if the notice is real or if someone is trying to get into my apartment. But I am not going to wait here to find out. I grab my keys and my bag and walk out of the apartment, locking the door behind me. I take the stairs instead of the elevator, moving quickly, listening for footsteps behind me. The parking lot is dark and mostly empty. I get in my car and sit there for a moment, trying to decide where to go. I cannot go to a hotel. If someone is tracking me, they will find me. I cannot go to a friend's place. I do not have anyone close enough to involve in this. I start the engine and drive. I end up at an all-night diner on the edge of the city, a place I have passed 100 times but never stopped at. I park in the back of the lot and sit in my car for a few minutes, watching the entrance, making sure no one followed me. Then I grab my bag and go inside. The diner is nearly empty. A waitress with tired eyes brings me coffee without asking. I sit in a booth in the corner facing the door and pull out my laptop. I open the files again, but this time I am not looking for evidence. I am looking for names. Specifically, I am looking for anyone connected to Crescent Hill Partners who might have a public profile, someone I can trace, someone who might lead me to whoever is really running this operation. I search through the financial documents, the contract agreements, the email chains, and then I find it. A signature on one of the Crescent Hill loan documents. A name I have not seen before. Marcus Treadwell listed as managing partner. I search for Marcus Treadwell. The results are surprisingly robust. He has a LinkedIn profile with a professional headshot and a detailed work history. Previously a financial consultant for several large firms, now the founder and managing partner of Crescent Hill Partners. His profile lists an office address in a high-rise downtown, less than 10 miles from where I am sitting. I click through to Crescent Hill's website and find a phone number. I write it down in my notebook, even though I know I am not going to call it. What would I even say? But having the information feels like something, a small piece of control in a situation where I have none. I keep searching. I find a few articles mentioning Treadwell in connection with various business deals, all of them carefully worded, none of them going into much detail. And then I find something else, a legal filing from 2 years ago, a civil lawsuit brought by a group of investors in Nevada against Crescent Hill Partners and Marcus Treadwell personally. The lawsuit alleges fraud, misrepresentation, and breach of fiduciary duty in connection with a failed real estate development. I click through to the case details. The lawsuit was settled out of court, terms undisclosed, no admission of wrongdoing. It is exactly the kind of thing that would not show up in a casual background check, but it is enough to confirm what I already suspected. Marcus Treadwell is not a legitimate businessman. He is a con artist with a polished resume. I close my laptop and sit back in the booth staring at my cold coffee. I have everything I need now. Fake consultants, fake companies, a fraudulent financing scheme, and a managing partner with a history of fraud. I have enough to take to the EPA, enough to trigger a full investigation. But I also know that the moment I make that call, I become a target. Not just for Darnell Systems, but for whoever is behind Crescent Hill. People who have already demonstrated that they are willing to commit fraud on a massive scale. People who might be willing to go further than that to protect their interests. I think about the notice slid under my door. I think about the blue sedan in Clearbrook. I think about Victor's warning and Carolyn's fear and the way Mitchell Varon sat in that meeting room and said nothing while they told me to stop asking questions. I pull out my phone and stare at the EPA number one more time. And then I do something I have been avoiding since this whole thing started. I call a lawyer. It takes me 3 tries to find one who will talk to me at this hour. Her name is Elena Vasquez, and she specializes in whistleblower cases. I explain the situation in broad strokes, leaving out names and specific details until I know I can trust her. She listens without interrupting, and when I finish, there is a long pause. "You need to file a report with the EPA immediately," she says, "and you need to document everything you just told me in writing. If what you are saying is true, this is a federal crime and you are legally protected as a whistleblower. But that protection only kicks in once you make an official report." "What happens after I file the report?" I ask. "They will open an investigation," she says. "It could take months, maybe longer. In the meantime, you need to be prepared for retaliation. Your employer will almost certainly try to fire you, discredit you, or both. That is why you need legal representation. I can help you with that, but you need to act now. The longer you wait, the more vulnerable you are." I thank her and hang up. I sit in the booth for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. Then I open the EPA hotline number and press call. It rings twice before someone answers. A calm, professional voice asks how they can help me. I take a deep breath and start talking. I spend the next 2 hours in that diner booth, walking the EPA investigator through everything I have found. The fake consultants, the unapproved equipment, the falsified compliance documents, the financial connection to Crescent Hill Partners, Marcus Treadwell's history of fraud. I give them names, dates, document references. I tell them about the portable drive, the files I downloaded, the photographs I took at the county records office. The investigator asks careful, detailed questions, and I answer every one of them. When we finally hang up, it is almost 3 in the morning. The investigator tells me that they will open a case file immediately, and that someone will contact me within 48 hours to arrange a formal interview. They tell me to keep the evidence secure and to avoid discussing the case with anyone at Darnell Systems. They tell me that I am now protected under federal whistleblower statutes, which means my employer cannot legally retaliate against me for making the report. I thank them and hang up, and I sit there in the empty diner feeling something I have not felt in weeks. Not relief exactly, not safety, but something close to hope. I sleep in my car that night, parked behind the diner with the doors locked and the portable drive in my jacket pocket. When the sun comes up, I drive to a coffee shop with Wi-Fi and send an email to Elena Vasquez with a detailed summary of everything I told the EPA. Then I call my supervisor at Darnell Systems and tell him I am taking a personal day. He does not ask why. I spend the rest of the day in the coffee shop waiting for something to happen. Nothing does. The next morning, I get a call from an EPA agent named Daniel Reyes. He wants to meet in person to go over my statement and review the evidence. We arrange to meet at a federal building downtown that afternoon. I bring the portable drive, my notebook, and every printed document I have. Agent Reyes is younger than I expected, maybe in his early 30s, with a serious expression and a methodical way of going through documents that reminds me of myself. He spends 2 hours reviewing everything I brought, asking questions, taking notes. When he is finished, he looks at me across the table and says, "This is solid. We are going to move forward with a full investigation." He explains that the investigation will take time, that they will need to subpoena records from Darnell Systems, Crescent Hill Partners, and the County of Clearbrook. He explains that I will likely be called to testify, either in a deposition or in court, depending on how the case develops. He explains that I should expect retaliation from my employer despite the legal protections, and that I should document any suspicious behavior or communication. He gives me his direct number and tells me to call him immediately if I feel threatened or unsafe. I thank him and leave the federal building, stepping out into the cold afternoon air with the strange, surreal feeling that I have just set something in motion that I cannot stop. 2 days later, I am fired. The official reason is performance issues and failure to meet expectations in my new role. The termination letter is signed by Gerald Timpson and copied to Victor Aldridge. It is professionally worded, legally airtight, and completely false. I call Elena Vasquez immediately. She files a wrongful termination complaint with the Department of Labor and sends a formal notice to Darnell Systems informing them that I am a protected whistleblower and that any further retaliation will result in federal charges. Within a week, I receive a settlement offer. Darnell Systems will reinstate me with full back pay and benefits, and they will agree not to contest my unemployment claim if I choose to leave voluntarily. In exchange, I sign a non-disclosure agreement and agree not to make any public statements about the company or the Clearbrook project. Elena advises me not to take the settlement. They are trying to buy your silence, she says. If you sign that NDA, you will not be able to talk about any of this even after the investigation is over. I think about it for a long time. I think about the 9 years I spent at Darnell Systems, the reputation I built, the career I thought I had. And then I think about the people in Clearbrook who are going to drink water filtered through substandard equipment, the county officials who were defrauded, the public trust that was violated. I tell Elena to reject the settlement. I tell her I want to see this through. The investigation takes 8 months. During that time, I live on unemployment and the small savings I managed to accumulate over the years. I move out of my apartment and into a cheaper place on the other side of the city. I take a part-time job doing technical consulting for a small firm that does not ask too many questions about my employment history. I testify twice, once in a deposition and once before a grand jury. I watch as the news breaks, first in local outlets, then in national publications. Darnell Systems under investigation for fraud in municipal water project. Executives charged with falsifying compliance documents. Crescent Hill Partners linked to multi-million-dollar scheme. I watch as Victor Aldridge, Gerald Timpson, Carolyn Pfeiffer, and Derek Hu are all indicted on federal charges. I watch as Marcus Treadwell is arrested at his office downtown, led out in handcuffs in front of a crowd of reporters. I watch as Darnell Systems releases a statement claiming that the fraud was carried out by a small group of rogue employees and that the company is cooperating fully with the investigation. I watch as Mitchell Varon, the senior engineer who sat silent in that conference room, gives an interview saying he had no idea what was happening, that he was just following orders. The case goes to trial. It takes 3 weeks. I am called as a witness and I spend 2 days on the stand, answering questions from prosecutors and defense attorneys, walking through every email, every memo, every calculation I flagged. The defense tries to paint me as a disgruntled employee, someone with a grudge, someone who misunderstood the complexity of the project. But the evidence speaks for itself. The fake consultants, the shell companies, the falsified documents, the financial trail that leads directly to Crescent Hill Partners. In the end, the jury deliberates for less than 6 hours. Victor Aldridge is convicted on 4 counts of fraud and sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. Gerald Timpson is convicted on 3 counts and sentenced to 5 years. Marcus Treadwell is convicted on 8 counts and sentenced to 12 years. Carolyn Pfeiffer and Derek Hu both accept plea deals in exchange for their testimony. Darnell Systems is fined $45 million and barred from bidding on federal contracts for 10 years. The Clearbrook project is canceled. The county is forced to start over with a new contractor, new designs, new compliance reviews. It will take years and millions more dollars. But this time, it will be done right. I do not go back to engineering. I cannot. The industry is small, and my name is now attached to one of the biggest fraud cases in recent history. Some people see me as a hero. Others see me as a troublemaker, someone who could not be trusted to keep quiet. Either way, no firm wants to hire me. Elena helps me file for whistleblower compensation through the federal program, and eventually I receive a payment that is enough to keep me afloat for a while. I use some of it to go back to school, to study environmental policy and regulatory compliance. I use some of it to start a small consulting business, helping municipalities and nonprofits navigate the kinds of projects that Clearbrook almost fell victim to. It is not the career I planned. It is not the life I thought I would have. But when I look back at that morning in the office, staring at the notification for a meeting I did not remember being invited to, I know I made the right choice. I think about the people in Clearbrook, the families who will never know how close they came to disaster. I think about the engineers who might see what happened to Victor and Gerald and Marcus and decide that fraud is not worth the risk. I think about the fact that sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything, and sometimes that is exactly what it takes. I stare at the fake notice taped to my apartment door one last time before I throw it away. That night, when I could not sleep, when I sat in my car behind a diner with a portable drive in my pocket, I made a choice. Not because I was brave, not because I was certain it would work out, but because I could not live with myself if I did nothing. And in the end, that was enough.